I canceled my wedding 2 minutes before saying I do when I saw an 8-year-old boy crying in the church hallway. He was one of the 3 children my fiancé had been hiding with his wife BEATRIZ for 15 years. I saw the boy of just 8 years old crying desperately in the dark and silent side corridor of the Centennial Church of Our Lady of Conception, the same cold and damp stone corridor where generations of brides had nervously waited for the moment to walk to the altar, where now Miguel held with his small and trembling hands the navy blue velvet box containing his father's 18-karat gold wedding rings. The light filtered through the original Baroque stained glass windows from the 18th century created kaleidoscopic patterns of colors on the Carrara marble floor, transforming the crystalline tears that ran down the childish face into small prisms that refracted all the pain of a child trying to understand the incomprehensible adult world of lies and betrayals. Daddy said today is the happiest, most important, and special day of his entire life since he was born. Even more important than when me, Sofia, and Pedrinho were born. He sobbed with a childish voice broken by anguish and confusion. Each word, a precise stab in my already shattered heart. I had just discovered through absolutely irrefutable evidence, photographs, official documents, and a devastating visit that Ricardo Augusto Mendonca, my seemingly perfect and dedicated fiancé, had methodically maintained another complete family for 15 long years, but it was exactly in that devastating and transforming moment, observing that innocent child suffering the consequences of his father's lies, that I did something considered unforgivable by society. Something that would change 3 innocent lives forever and ever. Before we continue this extraordinary and deeply moving story about betrayals, impossible choices, and the price of protecting childhood innocence, please subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our stories, and tell us where you are listening from in the comments below. Your participation is fundamental for us to continue bringing these soul-touching accounts. My full and true name is Carolina Mendez Ferreira, born on a hot March afternoon in 1986 at Santa Isabel Hospital, in the historic center of a metropolis that grew disorderly around its colonial churches. Only daughter of Helena Mendez Ferreira, exemplary federal public servant, who dedicated 3 decades to the Ministry of Education archiving dreams of generations, and Carlos Alberto Ferreira, civil engineer who died in a construction accident when I was only 12 years old, leaving in me not only the trauma of early loss, but also a morbid fascination with structures, with understanding what makes buildings resist or collapse, an obsession that would lead me years later to architecture school. I am 38 years old. Having lived intensely among complex and challenging architectural projects that consumed my sleepless early mornings in the office I set up with years of savings on the 12th floor of an Art Deco building that I helped restore myself, with professional drafting tables imported from Germany covered with meticulously detailed technical drawings of Baroque churches, colonial mansions, and municipal theaters that survived centuries of governmental neglect, and an apparently perfect engagement to Ricardo that I naively and passionately believed was too solid to question, too well structured to collapse. Until that fateful and absolutely transformative Saturday in December, when literally everything catastrophically crumbled exactly 2 hours and 15 minutes before the sacred yes that would never be pronounced before the golden altar of the church where my parents had married 39 years earlier. I am an architect specializing in meticulous and patient restoration of historical heritage mercilessly deteriorated by time, by chronic governmental negligence, and by voracious real estate speculation that devours the memory of cities. Painstaking and delicate work that requires not only deep technical knowledge of centuries-old materials and construction techniques, but also sensitivity to hear what the ancient walls whisper about their histories, their inhabitants, their secrets buried under layers of lime and paint. This obsessive and detailed work has taught me through countless hours observing cracks in frescoes, leaks in colonial roofs, and termites in noble woodwork that sometimes the apparently most beautiful, solid, impressive, and imposing constructions hide deep, irreparable, structurally compromising and fatal cracks in their foundations. Problems that begin microscopic and invisible but grow silently until it's too late for any repair. A cruel, ironic, and prophetic metaphor that I only fully understood in all its devastating and revealing dimension when my own carefully constructed life, planned and designed with the same obsession I dedicate to my professional projects, suddenly collapsed like a building condemned by the City Hall after technical inspection revealing irreversible and terminal corruption in its main support beams. I met Ricardo Augusto Mendonca on a rainy October afternoon, exactly 2 years and 7 months ago, at an international medical conference on humanized hospital architecture held at the most modern convention center in Latin America, where I was specially invited as the main speaker to present a revolutionary and innovative modernization project for the Snow Lucas Children's Hospital that would completely and radically transform pediatric oncology care through therapeutically playful environments scientifically designed to reduce stress in children undergoing treatment, a project that had gained international recognition and changed paradigms about how children's hospitals should be conceived. He was sitting in the third row of the packed auditorium with 500 health professionals, wearing an impeccably cut Italian-led gray suit that highlighted his broad shoulders of a former university swimmer, making meticulous notes in a black leather moleskin while I explained how specific colors, organic forms, and strategically positioned natural lighting could accelerate healing processes and reduce the need for pain medication by up to 30% according to peer-reviewed studies I had conducted over 3 years. Ricardo was, at that time and apparently, the youngest, most brilliant and promising pediatric cardiovascular surgeon to head an entire department at São Paulo University Hospital, the most prestigious, respected, and technologically advanced medical complex in the metropolis. With skillful and precise hands that daily saved the lives of babies born with malformed hearts, complex congenital defects that required highly complex surgeries, sometimes lasting 12 uninterrupted hours. After my lecture, he approached during the coffee break with 2 double espressos in porcelain cups, predicting with surgical precision that I would need caffeine after speaking for 2 hours, and initiated a conversation about how the architecture of surgical centers influenced surgeons' performance, citing studies that I myself had read but rarely found someone outside my field who knew about. His words were carefully chosen and measured, each phrase constructed with the same precision he applied to his surgical procedures, creating a conversation that flowed naturally between technical aspects and personal observations, between the professional and the personal, between the formal and the intimate. For the next 6 months of elaborately and meticulously planned courtship, Ricardo demonstrated a dedication and persistence that, in retrospect, should have alerted me to his capacity to maintain complex and long-term plans. He memorized my work schedules, casually appearing at the cafe where I had lunch on Tuesdays between site visits, always with some medical article about hospital architecture that he thought you might find interesting. He sent good morning messages precisely at 6:45, knowing that was when I woke up. Each message carefully calibrated to be affectionate without being invasive, interesting without being pretentious. Flowers arrived at my office not only on obvious dates but at strategic moments, after important presentations, when I lost bids, when I completed critical project phases. They weren't flashy and vulgar bouquets, but sophisticated arrangements of flowers that he researched to discover their symbolic meanings, always with handwritten cards in his surprisingly legible doctor's handwriting quoting famous architects or poets I admired. The marriage proposal happened on a full moon night in April, exactly 1 year after our first meeting, at the most exclusive and sought-after restaurant in the city, La Bernardine, where reservations had to be made 3 months in advance and where a meal cost the equivalent of a minimum wage. He had reserved the entire private garden terrace, decorated with thousands of LED lights creating an artificial starry dome, a string quartet discreetly playing pachelbel, every detail orchestrated with the precision of cardiac surgery. The ring was a jewelry masterpiece, a 5-carat princess-cut solitaire, VVS 1 clarity, D color, set in platinum with Art Deco details that mirrored my love for historical architecture. A piece he claimed was specially designed by an Amsterdam jeweler who studied my architectural projects to create something unique. When he knelt, with seemingly genuine tears in those green eyes that I now know are capable of producing emotion on demand, he said I was the only woman who could make his surgeon's heart, accustomed to literally seeing hearts, beat irregularly. During the 2 seemingly perfect and idyllic years of meticulously planned engagement down to every microscopic detail, Ricardo built such a convincing persona that even now, knowing the truth, I sometimes find myself doubting my own memory. He maintained a 300-square-meter duplex apartment on the top floor of a luxury building in Jardins, decorated with Italian design furniture and Brazilian contemporary art, where we spent weekends when his hospital schedule allowed. The apartment had an entire closet dedicated to my clothes, beauty products he observed me using and replenished before they ran out, even framed architectural projects on the office walls. I met his parents now. I know they were hired actors at elaborate dinners where his mother told me embarrassing stories from his childhood. showing photo albums that I later discovered were elaborate digital montages. His medical colleagues, some real whom he kept in the dark about his double life, others paid accomplices, treated me as the future Mrs. Mendonca at hospital gatherings. Ricardo consistently and convincingly presented himself as the dream man that every independent, professionally successful, emotionally mature and experienced woman imagines meeting after 35 when she has completely given up on adolescent fairy tales and accepted that real relationships involve commitment, imperfections, and mutual adjustments. He was attentive without being suffocating, always respecting my space and my need for solitary hours working on projects, but present enough not to seem distant or uninterested. He was romantic without being mawkish, with gestures that seemed spontaneous but that I now realize were carefully calculated for maximum emotional impact. A signed first edition of Lucio Costa found in a used bookstore. Surprise tickets to Zaha Hadid lectures, a weekend in Brasilia to study Niemeyer's architecture together. He was present despite the absolutely impossible and chaotic schedule of endless night shifts and emergency surgeries that constantly arose without prior warning, always with detailed and credible explanations about the medical cases that kept him away, using technical terms that I researched afterward and always checked out. He possessed this impressive, almost supernatural, and studied ability to make me feel like the only woman existing in the entire universe, even when he arrived, completely exhausted after what he described as 16 uninterrupted hours operating on children's hearts with complex congenital malformations. He would arrive with perfectly staged exhaustion, his tie loosened at the exact angle, dark circles under his eyes made with eyeshadow to appear authentic, but always with energy to listen to me talk about my projects, asking intelligent questions that demonstrated he was really paying attention and remembered previous conversations. He maintained a mental or perhaps literal spreadsheet of all my tastes, preferences, habits, and idiosyncrasies. He knew I preferred white wine to red, except with pasta, that I hated red roses for finding them cliché but loved peonies, that I was allergic to seafood but loved vegetarian sushi, that I slept on the left side of the bed, that I needed at least an hour of silence in the morning before being able to talk. Our shared routine was a perfectly orchestrated and harmonious symphony of encounters that seemed spontaneous but were meticulously scheduled to not conflict with his other life. Romantic candlelit dinners on Wednesdays. Now I know BEATRIZ had parent-teacher meetings at school on those days. Weekend getaways at romantic mountain inns once a month, coinciding with the children's visits to their maternal grandparents. In another city, international medical trips where I accompanied him, while BEATRIZ believed he was at lonely conferences. Each moment was doubly planned, each alibi had a backup, each lie was anchored in a partial truth that made it believable. He maintained 2 cell phones, 2 bank accounts, 2 wardrobes, 2 completely different profiles that never overlapped. A psychopathic juggling act that required photographic memory and cold blood that I would never have imagined possible. The obsessive planning of our wedding consumed every free moment of the last 8 months. Ricardo insisted it be a memorable event, worthy of the extraordinary woman you are, with an unlimited budget that he claimed came from years of savings and successful investments, but which I now suspect has a more nebulous origin. We hired the most sought-after wedding planner in the city, Marina Castellotti, who had organized weddings for celebrities and politicians, a 60-year-old woman with an affected Italian accent, and the schedule of a multinational CEO. The chosen venue was the Church of Our Lady of Conception, a Baroque jewel from the 18th century that I had personally restored in a 5-year project that earned me the National Architecture and Heritage Award. Every detail of the ceremony was designed to harmonize with the historic architecture. Colombian white flowers and ivory tones that complemented the gold of the altars, beeswax candles and colonial silver candlesticks, an authentic 19th century Persian carpet for the central nave. The reception would be at the Palace of Cedars, a neoclassical mansion transformed into an event space, with Versailles gardens where bohemian crystal tables would be arranged under white silk tents, each table named after a famous architect in gold calligraphy on Italian handmade paper. The 7-course menu was developed by a Michelin-starred chef, paired with wines personally selected during a trip we made to Bordeaux 6 months earlier. The cake, an architectural structure of 5 tiers inspired by Brasilia Cathedral, was ordered from Paris. The dress was a Valentino haute couture that cost more than many people earn in a year. Century-old French lace applied over pure silk, with my Portuguese great-grandmother's veil that crossed the Atlantic in a trunk in 1923. 300 guests were meticulously selected, renowned architects, influential doctors, politicians, businessmen, the cream of society that Ricardo insisted on impressing for professional reasons. Ricardo had insisted on personally taking care of some specific and mysterious details. "Trust me," he would say with that smile that melted any resistance. "I want some elements to be a surprise." Even for the bride, he took responsibility for the honeymoon, 3 weeks in the Mediterranean on a 20-meter yacht that he claimed to have secured through a grateful patient. He personally chose the rings at a jewelry store in São Paulo where he spent, according to him, entire afternoons obsessed with finding the perfect pair. He selected the pageboy, the 8-year-old son of his best childhood friend, who was conveniently always traveling. He organized the bachelor party that would be dignified but respectful, at a resort in Angra dos Reis with his doctor friends. Each secret he kept was, I discovered too late, a protection for his double life, a way to keep the two realities separate until the last possible moment. Even when he arrived completely exhausted and destroyed after 16 uninterrupted and stressful hours operating on literally broken hearts of children with complex and challenging congenital malformations. Always with carefully selected fresh and aromatic flowers on Fridays, regardless of how tired or busy he was. Always with loving and attentive good morning messages. Religiously sent even from sterilized operating rooms between one complex procedure and another, always with elaborate and detailed promises of a golden, resplendent, and perfect future that we would build together, brick by brick, beam by beam, foundation by foundation, like dedicated architects of our own, lasting and unbreakable happiness. Our shared routine was a perfectly orchestrated and harmonious symphony of romantic candlelight dinners when his unpredictable and urgent surgeries allowed, idyllic and relaxing weekends in strategically hidden romantic inns in the mountains. When he managed rare breaks from his seemingly endless and exhausting shifts, obsessively detailed and enthusiastic planning of a life together that included 3 children perfectly spaced 2 years apart, a spacious colonial house with lush and flowery garden, and a golden retriever named Archimedes in tribute to our shared love for mathematical precision and perfect symmetry. The dream wedding was scheduled and confirmed for the second cold Saturday in December in a centennial Baroque church that I myself had helped meticulously and passionately restore 5 years earlier in a complex project that earned me national recognition and important awards. Every detail, obsessively planned and reviewed multiple times during endless months of intense preparation that consumed every available free moment. White Colombian flowers specially imported because they were the only ones with the exact and specific shade of aged ivory that perfectly and harmoniously matched the Italian dress. Internationally renowned string quartet playing exclusively original Baroque compositions from the historical period of the church's construction. Luxurious and impeccable reception for 300 carefully and strategically selected guests among distant relatives, influential professional colleagues, and true friends who witnessed and supported our love story. 3-week honeymoon lazily and romantically traveling the Mediterranean coast on a 20-meter private yacht with discreet crew. Ricardo had vehemently and repeatedly insisted on personally and secretly taking care of some specific and mysterious details. Said with that enigmatic and seductive smile that always intrigued and fascinated, made that he wanted to surprise me with unique and unforgettable special touches that would make our day even more special, memorable and perfect. Little did I know in my passionate and blind naivety that the surprise would be discovering a meticulously compartmentalized double life, maintained with the surgical precision of a functional psychopath for 2 entire years of elaborate lies, perfect alibis, calculated deceptions, and constant emotional manipulation. The apocalyptic and devastating discovery happened precisely 2 hours and 15 minutes before the religious ceremony rigorously scheduled for 4 o'clock sharp. When I was already completely done up and transformed in the makeshift beauty salon at the back of the church. The 20,000 Dries Italian dress imported and perfectly fitted to my body by a couturier specialized in haute couture. The centennial authentic Belgian lace veil of my maternal great-grandmother delicately positioned over the elaborately constructed curls during 3 hours. The imported professional waterproof makeup that ironically and prophetically would be tested far beyond any reasonable expectation of the Swiss manufacturer. My mother Helena had arrived radiant and emotional for the final maternal loving adjustments and to give me something borrowed according to the secular family tradition, a bracelet of authentic pearls that had belonged to her Portuguese grandmother. When my cell phone vibrated insistently and urgently with a message from a completely unknown and unidentified number, I would normally completely and unhesitatingly ignore any technological distraction in that sacred, unique and unrepeatable moment. But something deep and primitive in my gut, perhaps ancient millennial feminine intuition or a guardian angel working desperate overtime to save me, made me immediately open the message that contained only a specific residential address in a neighboring town and a short but absolutely devastating and transformative phrase. Ask about Beatriz and the 3 innocent children before pronouncing the fatal and irreversible yes. My first rational and logical instinct was to completely and immediately ignore what obviously seemed to be some kind of cruel prank in terrible taste, or a desperate, pathetic, and envious attempt by someone ill-intentioned to sabotage my hard-earned and deserved happiness. But the specific and detailed address kept hammering insistently and obsessively in my mind like an out-of-tune and disturbing bell from an abandoned and cursed church. It was in a quiet, residential neighboring town, just 40 minutes away via the state highway, exactly and precisely the time Ricardo took for his mysterious, frequent, and urgent pediatric emergency surgeries that happened religiously, predictably, and suspiciously on alternating Wednesdays and Sundays. I hastily invented for my visibly worried mother that I urgently and undeferrably needed to fetch something extremely important that I had forgotten in the apartment, a lie so poorly elaborated, transparent, and obviously false that she deeply frowned her concerned maternal brow but did not verbally question, perhaps sensing with ancestral maternal wisdom that something much bigger, more serious, and more grave was at stake in that critical moment. I drove frantically and dangerously with the extremely expensive wedding dress irreversibly crumpling and destroying itself on the car seat, the ancestral and irreplaceable veil carelessly and disrespectfully thrown in the back seat like an abandoned ghost of a dead bride, in tragedy, the cell phone GPS guiding me implacably and inevitably to a destination that I simultaneously and contradictorily wanted and did not want to discover, like a modern Pandora before the forbidden and cursed box. The mysterious and threatening address led me through tree-lined, quiet and typically suburban streets to a cozy family home recently painted light blue with white details, an impeccable newly painted white fence, and a meticulously well-maintained garden with trimmed grass and flower beds. Exactly, and ironically, the type of dream family home that Ricardo and I had dreamed, planned and designed together in our endless and enthusiastic nighttime conversations about the future. There was a bright red painted wooden swing hanging with chains from the centennial and leafy tree in the front garden, 3 colorful children's bicycles of visibly different sizes methodically organized in the garage, an elaborate and personalized doghouse with the name Beethoven painted in crooked and uneven letters obviously made by inexperienced but dedicated childish hands full of innocent love. My heart began to beat so violently, uncontrollably, and painfully strong that I sincerely thought it would literally explode from my chest in 1,000 bloody pieces, my hands trembling uncontrollably and violently so much on the leather steering wheel that I urgently needed to park a block before to avoid crashing the car into some pole or tree. I walked slowly with wobbly and unstable legs like melting jelly, the imported and extremely expensive wedding dress dragging inappropriately and tragically on the dusty suburban sidewalk like a ghost shroud or dead bride, each step an agonizing eternity of desperate denial progressively and inevitably dissolving into cruel, devastating and inescapable reality. I rang the polished golden doorbell with my index finger, violently trembling like a green stick in a storm gale. The shrill and high-pitched sound echoing inside the silent house immediately followed by hurried footsteps of clearly different sizes and innocent childish voices shouting competitively and happily, "I'll answer it. I'll answer first. It's my turn," in a typical, noisy and innocent sibling dispute. The varnished solid wooden door opened slowly and dramatically revealing a natural blonde woman of 40 with tired, deep but surprisingly gentle and welcoming blue eyes, wearing a flowery domestic kitchen apron stained with fresh tomato sauce and flour, clearly interrupted in the middle of the elaborate and loving preparation of the special Saturday family lunch. She examined me thoroughly and at length from head to toe, processing the surreal image, the elaborate wedding dress creating an absolutely bizarre, surreal, and incomprehensible contrast with the everyday and familiar domestic scene. And something indefinable but profound in her experienced and tired eyes instantly changed from initial confusion and surprise to devastating, resigned, and almost relieved understanding. "You must be Carolina, today's bride," she said in a voice, too calm, too controlled, too resigned for someone whose life was about to explode publicly into millions of irreparable and painful fragments. "How do you know my full name? Who are you? What is happening here?" I asked in a strident, high-pitched and desperate voice that I didn't recognize as my own, broken and fragmented like glass shattered into 1,000 cutting pieces. Beatriz, because it could only be her. The mysterious woman mentioned in the anonymous message sighed deeply and at length, like someone carrying the crushing weight of the world on tired shoulders, and silently moved away from the door in an eloquent and resigned gesture, inviting me to enter her sacred territory, her home built with love, her life that I didn't know existed parallel to mine. The house smelled cozily and familiarly of homemade chocolate cake baking in the oven, fresh brewed Kofrix Azener. There were family and Laverit sizes and Laverdor smiling. And Laveritly, their Sizerodes Averits and Laverodes, and Styros and Slizes, Sizes, S's and Stizes and Stizes, and Medjus, Garidits Larry, Krinas and Saro, Kirgarik, Shins, Exane, Prayer, and Kren Kurit, and Kenwick, and Kudan, and Canon, Canik with Kuwik with it, well, to pick to it, to in, with it, to effort to test it, to catch it, to quit, to go for it, with to go cassus, quite it, the goss, sestivat, I to ply, I go to, where to get out to that could say with Sakira, which Evelik Ediata, we do it had a key to the dice, you that's doubts, get on with this good cow, a bit that I did to work as this look to begin to have a soul because where would you move? Stay of the kindergarten graduations with tiny graduation caps and symbolic diplomas. Elaborately decorated Christmases with enormous trees and colorful presents, Easters with chocolate eggs and bunnies. An entire parallel family life extensively, meticulously, and lovingly documented in hundreds of scattered picture frames that silently and deafeningly screamed the undeniable truth that I desperately and pathetically refused to accept. I always knew, deep in my maternal and feminine heart, that this inevitable and dreaded day would eventually come like an announced storm. Ricardo solemnly swore on our children's lives repeatedly that he had definitely and permanently ended things with you, 6 months ago. That the extramarital affair had been a terrible and momentary mistake that he was sincerely trying to fix with couples therapy. But when I accidentally saw the elaborate and expensive wedding invitation that fell from the inner pocket of his Italian suit jacket last week during Sunday family dinner, I knew immediately and definitively that he was lying blatantly and cruelly to both of us, as he always did. Extramarital affair. The words violently and painfully ricocheted in my mind like stray bullets in a shootout, each syllable a new and bleeding wound. I was the clandestine extramarital affair. I, with my 5-carat engagement ring that cost a small fortune, my 2 years of obsessive and detailed wedding planning, my 3 dozen weekly imported red roses, my romantic dinners, my nights of love. I was the lover who didn't know she was a lover, the other woman who didn't know she was the other woman, the homewrecker who didn't know she was wrecking anything. Beatriz showed me calmly, methodically, clinically, like someone surgically dissecting a cadaver in an anatomy class. The official marriage certificate of 15 years duly registered at the notary's office. The original and authenticated birth certificates of 3 children, Miguel, 8 years old, Sofia, 6 years old, Pedro, 4 years old, all with the complete paternal surname of the man who in less than 2 hours would theoretically and criminally be declared my husband before God and the law of men. The unavoidable and heroic emergency surgeries were sacred and routine family dinners. The important international medical conferences were family vacations at school holiday resorts. The exhaustive and dedicated night shifts were nights of patient help with complicated homework and elaborate bedtime stories with different voices for each character. Please, I beg you on my knees, don't tell the innocent children, Beatriz pleaded with silent, dense, and endless tears streaming down her tired but still surprisingly beautiful face despite the years of disappointment, betrayal, and emotional abandonment. Miguel is in an extremely difficult, delicate, and sensitive phase, very emotionally attached and dependent on his father. He wouldn't psychologically or emotionally bear knowing that his hero, idol, and example is this lying monster. The overwhelming and suffocating weight of that desperate plea from a protective mother trying to preserve her children's innocence hit me like a punch to the stomach. An emotional knockout, because even though I was completely destroyed, betrayed, humiliated beyond any adequate description in any known human language, I couldn't imagine or conceive cruelly and unnecessarily destroying the sacred and precious innocence of 3 children who were absolutely not to blame for having a father who lived an elaborate, compartmentalized double life with the calculated and cold precision of a high-performing functional sociopath. I promised, with a voice choked by contained tears and a lump in my throat, that I would find some creative and convincing way to cancel the wedding without exposing the sordid and devastating truth to the innocent children. and seemingly impossible and impractical promise that I had no idea how to fulfill but would religiously keep even if it cost me my own mental sanity and dignity. I returned to the church, driving completely on autopilot like a zombie, the external world around me blurred, unreal and dreamlike as if seen through glass, fogged by torrential rain or in a feverish nightmare. There were 150 elegantly dressed guests already arriving animatedly and festively. The five-star French buffet setting up tables with Egyptian linen tablecloths. The florists making the last meticulous and obsessive adjustments to the imported arrangements that cost a fortune, a complex and expensive machine of happiness in accelerated and irreversible motion that I needed to stop urgently and immediately without causing a social nuclear explosion that would destroy reputations. Ricardo was comfortably and carelessly in the back room with the 5 chosen groomsmen, probably telling sexist jokes about experienced married life and lost freedom while adjusting Italian silk ties and drinking 50-year-old single malt Scotch whiskey that he had specially and proudly saved for this unique and special occasion. The acidic and cruel irony that he had already been married for 15 years while pretending virginal nervousness and first-time groom anxiety hit me like concentrated sulfuric acid on an open, exposed, and bleeding wound. It was exactly then, in that moment, suspended in time, that I saw Miguel in the dark and silent side corridor of the church. Impeccably dressed as a page boy in a navy blue suit perfectly adjusted to his frail and childish body, holding with almost religious and solemn reverence a small dark blue velvet box with the 18-karat gold wedding rings. Ricardo had casually and carelessly said he was the beloved and special son of his best childhood friend who unfortunately could not attend because he was traveling on urgent business abroad. Yet another elaborate and cruel lie in a Himalayan mountain of deceptions and falsehoods. The boy was crying silently but intensely, large crystalline and pure tears streaming down his angelic and innocent face as he desperately clutched the box against his thin chest as if it were a sacred protective amulet or an anchor in a storm. "Why are you crying like this, my dear? What happened?" I asked, carefully kneeling on the cold Italian marble floor to be at his height, not caring about further wrinkling the dress already irreparably destroyed by emotions much greater than any imported fabric could withstand. "Daddy said today is the happiest, most important and special day of his entire life since he was born. More important than when we were born," Miguel sobbed with the brutal, raw, and devastating sincerity that only innocent and pure children possess before life teaches them to lie. He repeatedly and emphatically said that the bride is the most special, wonderful, and perfect woman in the whole world. That he has never been so completely and absolutely happy in his entire existence as he is with her. But if he is so absolutely and completely happy with her, why will he continue living with us at home? Why can't the so special and perfect lady live in our big house with us too? Why does Daddy need 2 houses and 2 families? I really don't understand complicated adults. They unnecessarily complicate absolutely everything, lie and hurt people. The pure, crystalline, and painful innocence of those words. The genuine and distressing confusion of a child desperately and uselessly trying to understand the elaborate, cruel, and incomprehensible lies of the father he idolized and loved unconditionally, broke me definitively and irreversibly in a way that discovering the monumental and criminal betrayal had not managed to do. There was an 8-year-old child trying to process emotions too complex, secrets too heavy, lies too big and cruel for his tender, pure, and innocent age. The instantaneous, transformative, and visible relief on the tense and anguished face of the boy was like watching the sun rising gloriously after a devastating storm, as if I had magically and instantly removed a ton of stones from his small, fragile, and tired shoulders. "So Daddy will continue being just ours forever and ever. Do you truly promise with your heart?" I solemnly and definitively promised, with my heart breaking into millions of microscopic and painful fragments, each cutting inside like ground glass mixed with coarse salt and vinegar. I calmly and gently asked him to carefully keep the rings and go find his father to respectfully return them, saying that the special lady had wisely and courageously realized she wasn't emotionally prepared to marry and that he should return immediately home with the true and legitimate family who loved him. Miguel ran out euphorically and relieved down the corridor with the renewed energy of a child who received an unexpected and wonderful Christmas present, and I remained there kneeling and broken on the cold Italian marble floor of the church that I myself had patiently and lovingly restored years before, dressed as a bride without a groom, promised without a promise, future without a future, present without meaning. What happened next was a kaleidoscopic, surreal, and cinematic blur of shocked and perplexed faces, concerned and whispering voices, unsolicited but well-intentioned hugs, and invasive and embarrassing questions without satisfactory or truthful answers. Father Antonio, with accumulated wisdom and patience of someone who had witnessed and mediated many human dramas in 3 decades of dedicated and compassionate priesthood, announced with a solemn, grave, and understanding voice that the ceremony was cancelled due to urgent, insurmountable, and unsolvable personal matters, and that those present were cordially and respectfully invited to enjoy the reception already completely paid for and prepared with such care. Ricardo appeared exactly 20 minutes later, counted on the church clock, his face a studied and controlled mask of contained fury and poorly disguised panic, trying desperately and aggressively to pull me to talk in private, away from curious eyes. Carolina, for the love of God and everything sacred, what the hell does this mean? Miguel came with a completely crazy and senseless story about a mistake, about me needing to return home immediately. What did you do? What did you tell him? I met Beatriz, your real wife, and the 3 beautiful children you have with her, were the only necessary and sufficient words I needed to calmly pronounce to instantly see all blood drain from his face, leaving him cadaverous gray, like a patient on an operating table, after a sudden cardiac arrest. He frantically and pathetically tried to stammer elaborate explanations, ridiculous justifications, desperate and empty promises that he would absolutely leave everything and everyone, that he would definitely and exclusively choose me, that the marriage with Beatriz was just an empty social facade without love, that there had been no true feelings for years, that the children would eventually understand and overcome it with appropriate therapy. Each desperate and lying word was a rusty and contaminated scalpel cutting already necrotic, rotten, and gangrenous tissue, a pathetic and useless attempt to save an organ already completely condemned and putrefied by advanced moral gangrene. You have 3 innocent and wonderful children, Ricardo, 3 pure children who believe firmly and unconditionally that their father is a life-saving hero and an exemplary man. I will never be, under any circumstances, the woman who cruelly destroyed this sacred and necessary illusion, even if it means carrying alone and eternally the crushing weight of this public humiliation and social shame. My mother Helena appeared like a biblical avenging angel of the apocalypse, her face a frightening mask of primitive and protective maternal fury that Ricardo had never witnessed before in 2 years of coexistence. Elena Fajita, respectable, discreet, an educated retiree from the federal public service after 30 years of exemplary service, instantly transformed into a furious force of nature fiercely and violently protecting her wounded and humiliated offspring. You have exactly 5 minutes timed on my watch to disappear definitively and permanently from this sacred church and from my daughter's life before I call my 3 veteran federal police brothers and turn this into a federal police case with handcuffs and scandal. Bigamy is a serious federal crime punishable by imprisonment. Doctor, your only choices from now on are to immediately run back to your true and legitimate family, or to intimately and lengthily get acquainted with a damp and cold federal cell. Ricardo tried desperately and uselessly to argue, but Helena simply menacingly raised her cell phone already with the federal officer's number on the illuminated screen and her finger over the call button, and he retreated cowardly and quickly like a vampire before a sacred cross, blessed with holy water. The endless, painful, and humiliating weeks that followed were a brutal and exhausting exercise in emotional survival that tested every fiber of my being to the absolute limit of what is humanly bearable. 300 elegant and gossipy guests had witnessed my public and humiliating abandonment at the altar. Even without knowing the sordid criminal and scandalous details, speculations ran wild, creative, and unrestrained, like fire in a dry summer forest. Some said Ricardo had another younger and more beautiful lover, others that I had discovered astronomical gambling and loan shark debts. Some more creative and imaginative invented elaborate stories of medical mafia, international organ trafficking, and money laundering. I let everyone speculate freely and creatively because any lie, however absurd, was infinitely better and more acceptable than the devastating truth that would destroy 3 innocent children and an already destroyed woman. The 20,000 real Italian dress was donated to the church charity bazaar. The ring returned with invoice for Ricardo to pay in smooth and humiliating installments. The dream honeymoon cancelled with total irrecoverable loss because there was no insurance in the world for a heart broken into millions of irreparable pieces. 2 endless weeks after the traumatic non-wedding, I received an unexpected message from Beatriz, respectfully asking to meet in person and talk. We chose a discreet and quiet cafe in the old commercial center, neutral and impersonal territory where 2 women destroyed and betrayed by the same narcissistic man could talk honestly without a curious or judgmental audience. She arrived punctually and alone, without the children. dressed with elegant simplicity that contrasted drastically with the expensive designer clothes that Ricardo gave me monthly to maintain social appearances. I want to deeply and sincerely thank you for what you did for Miguel and the other children, she began with a voice choked by contained emotion. He came home radiant and relieved, repeatedly saying that the beautiful and kind lady from the church had explained that Daddy belonged with his real family. Ricardo invented a ridiculous story about a last-minute cancellation due to a medical emergency, an unavoidable commitment, any lie to justify the unexpected and embarrassing return. Beatriz patiently told me the complete, painful, and devastating story. 15 years of marriage that began genuinely happy and passionate. 3 difficult and high-risk pregnancies that Ricardo accompanied only partially between real and invented shifts. The gradual and painful transformation from present and loving husband to occasional and distant visitor who always had an elaborate and convincing medical excuse. I knew about other previous women, Carolina. There were at least 3 confirmed before you over the years, but you were completely different from the others. You were the first one he wanted to marry officially in church. The first one who really threatened our carefully maintained facade of a perfect and happy family. Part of me secretly and shamefully desperately wanted you to say yes at that altar. To take him away definitively forever. To finally free me from this golden and suffocating prison where I daily pretend for the innocent children that their absent father is a busy hero saving lives when in reality he is systematically destroying ours. The intense and revealing conversation extended for 3 emotional hours. 2 women painfully discovering that they had much more in common than the narcissistic man who had systematically betrayed them. Beatriz was a brilliant and dedicated teacher who had drastically sacrificed her promising career to take care of the children full-time while Ricardo supposedly built the family's financial future with surgeries that we now knew were at least 50% fictitious. I had invested 2 precious years in an elaborate and cruel lie. She had wasted 15 years of her youth. We were both failed architects of lives built on rotten, decaying, and compromised foundations, desperately and uselessly trying to keep the structure standing even knowing that total collapse was mathematically inevitable and imminent. We exchanged phone numbers, not exactly out of friendship, but out of fundamental solidarity as survivors of the same devastating emotional shipwreck. 1 turbulent month later, Ricardo appeared without warning or invitation at my professional office. Dressed in the same expensive Italian suit he wore during our fateful first meeting. The exclusive French perfume that always made me dizzy now causing instant, violent, and uncontrollable nausea. Carolina, I desperately and urgently need you to know and believe that I am definitively and irrevocably separating from Beatriz. I told her clearly and definitively that I choose you forever, that I want to rebuild from scratch what we lost. That we can completely start over in another distant city where absolutely nobody knows our complicated history. The children are strong, resilient, and adaptable. They will eventually overcome with proper therapy. Children always overcome traumas with professional support. We can be genuinely and truly happy. I know, and I'm absolutely certain that we can. All that intense love cannot have been completely a lie or illusion. The sociopathic and psychopathic audacity of those delirious words. The insanity of sincerely believing that I would accept being built on the smoking and radioactive rubble of a destroyed nuclear family filled me with volcanic and primitive fury that I didn't know I was humanly capable of feeling. Ricardo, you spent 2 entire and precious years making me firmly believe that I was the only woman in your life while you returned every night to a home with 3 children and a legitimate wife waiting. You made your own innocent 8-year-old son carry the rings for his own father's criminal and immoral marriage to another woman. You are pathologically and irreversibly incapable of genuinely loving anyone besides yourself. Leave my office immediately and definitively before I call security and publicly tell everyone exactly what kind of narcissistic monster and liar you really are. He tried to insist desperately and pathetically, even knelt on the floor in a ridiculous theatrical performance of false remorse. But I simply picked up the phone and determinedly began to dial security. He ran out hurriedly like a cowardly rat, discovered, the cultivated image of the respectable surgeon definitively falling apart like a sandcastle in the inevitable high tide. I later discovered through Beatriz that he had blatantly lied about the separation. Had told her that he urgently needed to travel for an unavoidable international medical conference in another country. She finally created courage and determination after 15 years and formally filed for contentious divorce, using the compromising messages he sent me as irrefutable evidence of continued and systematic adultery. Shared custody was categorically denied when the judge examined the systematic and documented pattern of pathological lies. The children remained entirely with BEATRIZ, and Ricardo can see them only bi-weekly under strict judicial supervision. 6 long and painful months after the wedding that never happened, I received an unexpected letter from Miguel written in the careful and neat handwriting of a diligent and intelligent child. Dear lady with the beautiful dress and kind heart, Mom said I can write to properly, thank you. Dad doesn't live with us permanently anymore. But it's all right, and even better because now, when he visits fortnightly, he gives us genuine attention instead of constantly being on his phone working. Mom doesn't cry hidden in the bathroom anymore, thinking we don't hear or notice. Thank you sincerely for patiently explaining that Dad belonged with our family on that confusing day. Even though he now lives somewhere else far away, at least he's not permanently living with another parallel family. With love and gratitude, Miguel. I read the letter dozens of times obsessively, each reading simultaneously a painful stab and a healing balm, contradictory and concurrent. That pure child would never fully or in detail know what really happened on that fateful Saturday in December. Would never completely understand the complexities of why the lady in the beautiful dress abruptly and definitively disappeared from his father's life, but he was at relative peace with the edited version of the story that protected his precious innocence. I carefully replied, saying he was a very special, brave, and mature boy. That lovingly caring for his mother and younger siblings was the work of a true hero. That the unconditional love of family was the most valuable and precious treasure in the entire world. I didn't mention his father directly. I couldn't blatantly lie saying Ricardo was a good and upright man. But I also couldn't and wouldn't cruelly destroy the paternal image the boy still held in his heart, even if scratched and questioned. The long and painful process of emotional healing was tortuous and challenging, like a winding mountain road full of blind curves, precipices, and hidden dangers. Intensive therapy twice a week with a psychologist specialized in marital betrayal and narcissistic abusive relationships, who patiently helped me understand that Ricardo presented classic and severe traits of malignant narcissistic personality disorder, incapable of true empathy or genuine love, a master manipulator in systematic emotional gaslighting. I painfully learned that I had been a classic victim of calculated love bombing, a manipulative technique where the narcissistic abuser strategically floods the victim with excessive and artificial attention and affection at the beginning of the relationship to create deep and lasting emotional dependence. Each seemingly romantic flower, each seemingly affectionate message, each seemingly loving gesture had been meticulously calculated to inexorably trap me in a golden and deadly spiderweb. Today, 5 transformative years after that Saturday that should have been the happiest and became the most revealing and liberating of my life, I can state with conviction that I made the right choice, even if considered unforgivable and incomprehensible in the eyes of many. I consciously chose to preserve the sacred innocence of 3 pure children instead of cruelly exposing the truth that would psychologically destroy them. I courageously chose to carry alone the devastating public humiliation instead of sharing the burden with innocence. I deliberately chose to protect his family even if it meant being eternally seen as the abandoned bride, the rejected woman, as someone with such a serious and irreparable flaw that the groom preferred to flee cowardly rather than marry. The truly unforgivable would have been to use those innocent children as weapons of revenge against their narcissistic father, to permanently destroy their innocence to punish the man who cruelly betrayed me. I chose to be forever remembered as the mysteriously abandoned bride instead of being the woman who consciously destroyed a family with children. And with this difficult but necessary choice, I can finally live at peace with my conscience. If you enjoyed this moving and touching story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your sincere impressions about this story in the comments. To hear the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching and following along.